Once upon a time, there was a bad and jealous queen who had a kind and beautiful daughter. Many princes from different countries desired to marry the princess. However, the queen had a cruel requirement for any prince who wanted to marry her daughter. Each prince had to complete an impossible task, and if they failed, they would lose their life. The queen seemed determined to make sure her daughter never married, and she laughed at her daughter's unhappiness. Prince Charles was the son of a poor king in a small country. When he heard about the beautiful princess, he expressed his desire to marry her to his father. However, his father was concerned for his safety and tried to dissuade him. The king couldn't bear the thought of losing his only son, and he believed there were many beautiful women in the world for Charles to choose from. Nevertheless, Prince Charles was deeply saddened by the idea of not being able to marry the princess. He couldn't eat or sleep, and he became weak. Eventually, Prince Charles's father gave in and told him to go and try his luck. He hoped that his son would fare better than the other princes who had attempted the impossible tasks. The prince was overjoyed and regained his strength. He prepared for his journey, knowing that his father's poverty meant he would have to find servants along the way. Shortly after setting off on his journey, Prince Charles encountered a small mountain. Approaching it, he realized it was not a mountain at all, but a very fat man who was fast asleep. When the fat man woke up, the prince asked him what he was doing there. The man replied that he was asleep because he had eaten a lot of food that morning and was now hungry for lunch. The prince saw an opportunity and proposed that the fat man become his servant. In exchange for food, the fat man agreed to serve the prince. From that point on, the fat man followed Prince Charles on his journey. As they continued their journey, the prince and the fat man came across another man with a remarkably large left ear. This man explained that he could hear things from a country over the sea because of his giant ear. Intrigued, the prince asked him what he could hear in the house of the beautiful princess. To the prince's dismay, the man replied that people were crying because another prince had died. Seeing the potential usefulness of this man's ability, Prince Charles asked him to be his servant. The man, known as Big Ear, gladly accepted the offer and joined the prince and the fat man on their journey. Continuing their travels, the prince, the fat man, and Big Ear came across two long objects by the road. The fat man mistook them for trees, but Big Ear corrected him, revealing that they were actually the longest arms in the world. The prince was fascinated and asked the owner of the arms to come with him. The man, known as Long Arms, agreed to be the prince's servant. Shortly after recruiting Long Arms, the group encountered a man with a hand covering one eye. The man explained that he could see things from a great distance and through solid objects. However, when something was close to him, he had to cover one eye to see it clearly. Impressed by his ability, the prince requested that the man, known as Quick Eyes, become his servant. As they continued their journey, the sun grew increasingly hot. The prince, feeling the heat, opened his coat to cool down. At this point, they encountered a man wearing two thick coats and a large hat, making it impossible to see his face. The man revealed that he felt cold, and when he opened his coat, the sun disappeared and everything froze. Recognizing the potential of this man's ability, the prince asked him to be his servant. The man, known as Cold Man, agreed to accompany the prince, but with the condition that his coat should never be opened, as it could bring extreme cold. After recruiting all these unique servants, Prince Charles and his entourage finally arrived at the city where the princess and the queen resided. The prince wasted no time and went straight to the queen, expressing his desire to marry the princess. The queen, with a cold smile, agreed to let him marry her daughter under one condition. He had to successfully complete 3 tasks to prove his worth. The prince eagerly asked the queen about the first task. She explained that she had a beautiful blue jewel that had fallen into the river. He needed to retrieve the jewel before the sun went down. After hearing the task, the prince turned to his servants to seek their help and advice. Quick Eyes, using his sharp vision, took a look at the river and spotted the jewel. However, it was out of reach for Long Arms. The Fat Man, using his unique abilities, opened his mouth and drank all the water in the river. With the riverbed exposed, Long Arms was able to retrieve the jewel and handed it to the prince. Upon seeing the success of the prince, the queen became furious. However, she didn't give up and decided to devise an even more challenging task for him to complete. The next day, the queen invited the prince to a feast. She provided him with 30 chickens and informed him that he had to finish eating them before 12. The prince requested to invite a friend to join him, as he didn't like eating alone. The queen reluctantly agreed, allowing him to bring one friend. The prince chose the Fat Man as his dining companion, and the two quickly devoured the 30 chickens. However, the Fat Man's hunger was insatiable, and he proceeded to eat all the other animals in the queen's possession, as well as the remaining food in the kitchens, trees, and ground. With no other food left, the Fat Man fell asleep. When the queen called for her lunch at 12, there was no food to serve her. Enraged, she discovered that the Fat Man had eaten everything. The queen decided to proceed with her plan to kill the prince, believing he would not survive the next part of the test. As part of the next challenge, the queen asked the prince to join her and the princess for dinner. Following the meal, the prince would be given the opportunity to spend 2 hours talking to the princess. However, there was a catch. If the prince fell asleep while conversing with the princess, she would vanish by magic, and he would meet his demise. The prince, determined not to fall asleep, put on his best clothes and engaged in conversation with the queen and the princess. However, the queen had secretly drugged the prince's wine. Unaware of this, the prince consumed the wine and soon began to feel drowsy. Despite his best efforts, the prince succumbed to sleep. When he awoke half an hour later, he realized the princess was gone. Panicking, he called for his servants and together they decided to search for her. With Big Ear's ability to hear over great distances, the group discovered that the princess was trapped inside a tree, magically hidden by her mother's men. Quick Eyes confirmed this by seeing the princess within the tree. The prince and his servants devised a plan to rescue her. The prince instructed Cold Man to open his coat, causing snow to fall and freezing the nearby river. They crossed the frozen river and successfully retrieved the princess. Long Arms then used his extraordinary length to return the prince and the princess to the high room where they had been conversing before. The queen, unaware of the rescue mission, confidently went to check on the prince and the princess. To her surprise, they were both safe and sound. Feeling defeated, the queen realized she could no longer prevent their union. Accepting her defeat, she left the country. The prince and the princess were overjoyed to be together, and the prince's loyal and extraordinary servants continued to serve them. The couple lived happily ever after, surrounded by the support and companionship of their unique servants. In this tale of love, perseverance, and the triumph of good over evil, Prince Charles defied all odds to marry the princess he loved. With the help of his extraordinary servants, he overcame the Queen's impossible tasks and rescued the princess from her magical prison. Their union brought an end to the Queen's jealousy and ensured a happily ever after for the prince, the princess, and their loyal servants.